Good evening and welcome to Solutionary TV. I am your host, Dr. Tatiana, and I am excited to talk tonight about the things that we don't know. So we don't know what we don't know until someone tells us, and we are in an era of disclosure, and we are in an era where science is breaking through with so many new discoveries. We've got new organs in the body that we've discovered. We have new habitable planets, and the disclosure just continuing to unravel. And so tonight we're going to talk from a place of perhaps what we've always believed about the known universe, which is 95% dark to us, now that we understand that principle as well. Perhaps that there's a lot more mysteries going on with our solar system as well. And we have a guest tonight that would say absolutely and completely and totally true. Tonight I'm excited to invite Dr. Raymond Keller II, a retired history professor that's lived and worked in 44 different countries and has been writing about UFOs and paranormal activity since 1967. He was the founder and the director of Outer Space International Research and Investigation Society, also known as OSIRIS, in California, as well as the publisher and co-editor of the New Millennial Star, a monthly pre-internet tabloid newspaper with a circulation of 7,500 copies. Dr. Keller has 3 books that explore various facets of the conditions and the life on Venus. Yes, Venus in many dimensions, from a perspective of conspiracies, history, theosophy, ufology, and current events, especially space research. Dr. Keller's books, which have received multiple awards, include Venus Rising, which I have been enjoying very much, Final Countdown, Rockets to Venus, and Cosmic Rays, Excellent Venus Adventure. We're excited to have him here tonight. Welcome, Raymond. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Tatiana. Great privilege.
Well, it is my privilege. We get to talk about really fun things on my show. And coming from a place where we believe that all the solutions are available, but have not necessarily been publicly made known to us through mainstream media and through our current systems, it's always exciting to get more information that might create greater clarity about the origins of the soul and humanity and how much more connection we really have to one another. And also in this case, perhaps what connection we may have to space brothers and sisters that may not be that far away. So I'm excited to introduce more about your work. And let's just start with what brought you into such keen focus in studying Venus and then broadening into Venusian history and becoming a contactee.
Well, it all began back in the 1960s. My aunt gave me a book about the solar system, and I automatically turned to the idea of, is there life out there? Of course, later on in life, I learned that Helena Blavatsky, the co-founder of the Theosophical Society, of which I'm a member, had said that the immensity of space was filled with intelligences. So why not? You know, there's not a part of space that's really empty. Even the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, believed that light was a living energy.
Yes, and that's actually becoming much more understood, at least in some of the high scientific minds and in the publications. Again, not quite mainstream, but we are learning that DNA is impacted by light, that light is so much more than what we can see as human beings with the limitedness of our cones and rods and our visual acuity, that Only 4.7% is even visible to us in terms of what, is comprised of the universe, and that's what we could consider real matter. There is so much going on with our solar system right now, Raymond, and there has been such limited understanding about really the interaction between the energies of planets, interplanetary climate change that we're all experiencing during the Great Year right now, what we've been able to see with Hubble's the telescopes and with some of the recent satellite footage and cloaking. And I mean, there's just so much that would leave us to believe that we're all alone here in the solar system, and maybe a lot of agenda that's been trying to concrete that throughout the ages. Tell us what's really going on Venus. Tell us what you know about its history and where we might be bringing ourselves current as we move through some of your wisdom in this show.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Tatiana. One of the things that impresses me the most is that there have been 4 nations that have sent a total of 43 space probes to our sister planet Venus. And this is more than to any other celestial body in space, any other orb in the solar system, including the moon. And if Venus was the dead, lifeless world that they would have us believe, then why spend billions upon billions of the taxpayers' dollars from all these countries to send these probes there?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Obviously, that's some of the history that you've done. I've never seen an author do the kind of historical footnoting that you have done. Let's kind of start at the beginning from your first interest in Venus and maybe what some of the esoteric teachings have taught us about life on Venus and its population on Earth.
Yes. Well, going back to the ancient times, back to the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was founded by Aeneas, who was a general and a refugee from the Trojan War, but the son of the goddess Venus. And he was the founder of Rome, and all of the Roman emperors have credited Lady Venus as being the mother of the empire. The Roman emperors embroidered bees, which were bees and doves, which were symbolic of Lady Venus, on their robes. When we go through history, the Merovingians, the Cathars, and others were. I'm getting some kind of an echo there.
Oh, okay. You know what? We can hear you just fine. If you can kind of proceed, Raymond, that would be wonderful.
Oh, okay. But even up through the Middle Ages, during the times of the troubadours, one of the knights returning from the Crusades, Tannhauser, returning to his home in Germany, coming up through the Italian peninsula and then up into the Alps, crossing over the Alps to get back to his hometown. He encountered a woman arrayed in a dazzling white outside of an alpine mountain, and she extended her hand to him, and he took it, and they literally walked through a door of light into this mountain to a mythical, magical city called Venusburg. And she identified herself as Lady Venus. And then as we move up in history, we see Emanuel Swedenborg, the famous scientist and theologian from Sweden. He had many experiences on metaphysical planes with angelic beings, and was taken to the planet Venus, where he met with various ranks of angels, thrones, and dominions that showed him the hierarchy of light which presided over that world. And speaking of angels, the late Billy Graham, who just passed away not too long ago. He wrote a book called Angels, God's Secret Agents, and that was in 1975. And on page 21 of that book, he said that he believed angels and aliens were one and the same thing, and he wouldn't be surprised if angels arrived here on the earth in flying saucers.
Well, it's amusing when you really think about it. We've got, scripture, modern day scripture, and a lot of amazing ancient esoteric writings that haven't necessarily made its way into scripture. But with further investigation, analysis, and really good research and translation skills, a lot of what heavenly events sound like they're originating from, of wheels within wheels and fiery chariots, sound a whole lot more like what maybe a very advanced civilization that is spacefaring would be traveling in. Wouldn't you agree, Raymond?
Oh, I certainly would. And since the universe is composed of the same composite materials, eternal materials almost, we can presume that the same periodic table is extended everywhere, and that perhaps life is a natural consequence of the evolution of matter throughout the whole cosmos.
Yes, it's exciting. We went from the materialistic scientific view that the chance of life even taking place on this planet was so diminished in its potential and so rare that we'd be lucky to find anyone or even bacteria on these other planets. And didn't it just recently come out in some of the peer-reviewed scientific magazines and journals, and then eventually into some of the mainstream press, that we've already found tens of thousands in habitable planets that are, within our general region of the known galaxy, and it just continues to kind of beg its forgiveness. What was once absolutely certain is now completely not certain, and the potential for life is that much more vast.
Oh yes, yes, Dr. Tatiana, that's quite true. The Kepler probe, which they're sending up a replacement for now, has discovered about 4,000 planets within our sector of the galaxy, our sector of the spiral arm. Many that are quite Earth-like in their conditions, especially in the Gliese star sector. There's about 6 worlds that have been discovered there in that one solar system alone that are quite Earth-like. And even the Venus Express, sent by the European Space Agency, said that for about 2 billion years, they believed that paradisical conditions existed on Venus with moderate temperatures and vast oceans, and very much an idyllic world. And when we consider that 2 billion years for life to have existed on Venus, and intelligent life on Earth only goes back 2.5 million years to the discovery of hominids in the Olduvai Gorge in Ethiopia by the Leakeys with Lucy and so forth. This is pretty amazing. So the Venusians had plenty of time to evolve, and if there was any danger to their world, they had plenty of time to adapt to it, to go underground, or to move into higher dimensions of a lesser density.
Right. There's so much rich history in your recap bringing us forward. I'm particularly interested in various aspects of it, including Emanuel Swedenborg's work, because I did have Curtis Childs, a representative of the Swedenborg Foundation, on the show several months back, and we talked about some of the profound work that Swedenborg brought to the mental health arena when it comes to the westernized concept of medicine and the materialistic view, which really does not do the greatest service to the patients that have been served by that narrow view of science, and what is actually perceptible, what voices can be heard, what what visions may be perceived by those that are quote unquote classified to be schizophrenic or hallucinogenic, because again, if 95% of the universe is not visible to us, but we have certain individuals that are tied in or a little bit more keen or more permeable somehow, instead of doing them the service of realizing that they were actually accessing part of that 95%, they have really been isolated and mishandled and very often drugged and ignored when there was a wealth of information and understanding that could have come through. What I was not aware of, however, was his tie to the Venusians. Could you, for the sake of our audience and continuity, expound on that a bit more and their angelic presence in his education and understanding?
Yes, he wrote a book about life on other planets in our solar system with a special emphasis on Venus. And he said that there was a stratification in Venusian society where one rank of angels was there to teach others that were preparing to incarnate on the earth and other worlds, to kind of prepare them for the trip.
Well, that's fascinating. So it was kind of like a migrational stopping point from the soul prior to taking on the density of being a 3D human being on this planet. Am I understanding you correctly, Raymond?
Yes, that is correct, and some of the higher angels would visit the earth and incarnate as teachers or avatars.
Well, bless them for that. Heaven knows here in this density, we need more of that, don't we? Oh, I am excited to consider that potential, Raymond. Let's talk a little bit about the hierarchy of angels as they relate back to Venusian society. As you understand it, how long has this been the status quo, at least as long as human beings would consider it to be historically pertinent to our civilization?
Well, it goes back about 18,500,000 years, and Helena Blavatsky was one of the first to write about these things. One of her very first writings was History of a Planet, which she wrote in 1877 in London. And Helena Blavatsky said that truth was the highest religion. And she said that we acquire knowledge from many areas, from science, from philosophy, from comparative religions, from history, and that it's not confined to any one set of dogmas. So her History of a Planet, for the time that it was written, was very concise, and she mentions several references to some of the Gnostic writings, but now we have a greater understanding because in 1945 there was a great discovery at Nag Hammadi in Egypt of various Gnostic texts, which describe the immaterial versus the material world. By immaterial, I don't mean that it's not tangible, because it is very tangible. It's just of a lighter density, or what we might say another dimension.
Right. And that goes hand in hand with a lot of the scientific understanding, as astrophysicists and quantum physicists are helping us understand that out of 100% of the universe, 95% isn't visible to us. It isn't that it doesn't have matter. I'm told that up to 27% of that is dark matter, so not visible to us, but has density that can be measured. And the remaining 73 to 77%, depending on which scientist you're listening to, says this is dark energy. So we're talking about realms of dimensionality, aren't we, Raymond? We're talking about realms within realms and dimensions within dimensions that can hold life, but not necessarily life that is vibrating or at the frequency or resonance of this 3D world that we're spending so much of our focus on.
Yes, this is right. And the many of the ascended masters who have lived and walked among us, avatars sent from Venus and other advanced planets and civilizations, have demonstrated amazing abilities. They could precipitate matter, to walk through walls, to bilocate themselves, and we all have these powers that are latent within us. Helena Blavatsky taught us that perhaps we have as many as 22 or more of these extrasensory powers beyond the five senses. Telekinesis, psychometry. I mean, the list is a remote viewing. This list is quite long, and we have these abilities. We have these powers, and the Venusians and other brothers and sisters from the celestial realms are here to help us develop these before it's too late. Maybe we could start to turn things around.
You know, we're going to have to talk about that concept of too late. You know, when we get into how many civilizations may or may not have risen and fallen on this planet, have experienced coming to full term with the need to be in a 3D density as opposed to, you know, destroying themselves, but maybe potentially evolving. We know that there are, you know, cities that have been discovered. Often those wonder about Machu Picchu or Göbekli Tepe. You know, what happened to some of these people? They don't fit into the timelines that our historians have told us, that we have experienced the rise of human technology and, you know, the Bronze Age and the Stone Age and where we are with technology. Our history is wonky. It doesn't fit. And we realize that that Darwinian model is really not a great representation of where we are. What have the Venusians contributed to our understanding about the rich texture and length of our history, Raymond, that you could illuminate us with?
Well, they were once as we were, and they've gone through many of the struggles that we have now encountered. They had a war with artificial intelligence, a war with the machines, and fortunately, their humanity won out. And one of the things that we're facing now that we could learn from the Venusians is that we are like children playing with matches in a dynamite shack. We're on the verge of exploring the solar system and tapping into the vast powers of the universe. But we don't understand these fully, and we don't have the spiritual maturity necessary to deal with these things. And we might very well go the way of the dinosaurs unless we take a pause and listen to our hearts and listen to the message from the teachers that have been sent among us.
I would like to talk more about those teachers that have been sent among us. I would understand, and for the sake of our viewers that are new to this work, perhaps, Raymond, let's talk a little bit about what the Venusians look like, how they have personally evolved. Are we starseed from Venus? Have they interbred with human beings? Give us a little bit more background so that we understand some of that richer history.
Yes, well, the galactic community is interspersed in our genes. We have a lot of DNA that we don't know what it is, about 4%. They call it junk DNA, but it's not junk. I can assure you that. And we have a connection not only with the Venusians, but with the Pleiadians and other star peoples. And we're all a big celestial family.
So would it be accurate then to say that Lady Venus that has shown up during various ages in human history is always the same lady, or is this kind of more of a monarchy or a hierarchy, and there have been different representatives holding that position? Help us understand that also a bit.
Oh, yes. Well, on Venus, they have 51 jurisdictional areas, and they do have a queen that's selected every 3 years. That's their current status.
Okay. So
and
it's a matriarchy of sorts, or would
yes,
that be the right term?
yes, it's a matriarchal society, and they've dropped some clues here and there. Nikola Tesla, as you know, he was very fascinated with bees and also with the planet Venus. He built a telescope in 1898 and then perfected some later models. And he believed that he was in communication with another species of advanced bees that inhabit Venus. And I looked at the connection between bees and the planet Venus. And one of these connections has to deal with the Fibonacci number sequence. For example, um, the orbits of Earth and Venus are always in a direct Fibonacci relationship. So for example, for every 8 orbits of Venus, there would be more because it's the inner world. There would be exactly 5 of the Earth. And for every higher Fibonacci number, the next lowest Fibonacci number would be the number of orbits for the Earth. And this is an exact ratio. And then we see the Fibonacci numbers when they're graphed out represent the golden spiral. And many of the UFO crop circles are representative of this Fibonacci graphing.
Yeah, there are some really spectacular and I think really underdocumented um, symmetries and sacred geometries and messages that are latent in a lot of these crop circles that are demonstrative of a fractal universe and of the seed of the universe being sacred geometry, and kind of a view of a cymatic concept that everything's about vibration and resonance and frequency. It's really very exciting, isn't it, Raymond?
Oh, it is. And for that 8 orbits of Venus, and then there would be 5 inferior conjunctions of the planet with the Earth at equidistant points. And this is formation of the pentagram, which is not the diabolical symbol that people make it out to be, but was recognized by the ancient esoteric schools as the sign of the goddess Venus of the divine feminine.
Interesting. There is so much history around divine feminine and a large sway of power moving away from the balance between the matriarchies and the patriarchies. We know we've been in a patriarchy for quite some time, and it seems like the great balance that needs to take place here on the planet would be maybe to stop swinging that pendulum so far. But let's talk about what we don't know, because we don't have in our current understanding of human history what a matriarchy would look like, and what does Venus really have to offer us. Obviously there's a lot here, but let's start with why they're set up as a matriarchy. Can you share more about that?
Yes. In my second book, Final Countdown, Rockets to Venus, and then in the third book, The Venus Adventure, I go into the history of the interaction of the hive collective on Venus with the humanoid species, and how they learn from each other and how they coexist.
And how is that set up? Is it that it's part of their indoctrination and their education from a very young age to take on this sort of matriarchal understanding, and how does that affect their society? Are there males there also? I think we need a bigger context, Raymond.
Oh yes, there definitely are. There are both sexes there, and but it is ruled by a queen, much as the hive. But they have a collective consciousness where we on Earth are more individualized in our thinking. They think more like the bees do in the hive of what's better for for the whole. And a lot of people don't realize that bees communicate and they negotiate, and they negotiate from the purpose of what's better for the whole versus them each individual individual. So if somebody has an idea that's better, they'll concede it and work for a common purpose.
So how did you come into such intimate understanding about their history, about their economy, about their governance? Explain, if you would be so kind, share with our viewers how you came about understanding this and being able to develop it into the trilogy that you have. How much is direct experience? How much of it was maybe received in various states of openness and permeability? Can you share more about that, please, Raymond?
Oh, yes. In my book, Rockets to Venus, I tell a little bit about my beginnings in investigating UFOs and the flying saucer phenomena. And I think it's on page 41 of this book. Let me see if I can show you that. I don't know if you can see that.
If you can turn a little bit to your right, Raymond, we're going to get a better view. Yeah, pull back just a little bit. Okay, so tell us what we're seeing.
Okay, this is the National Enquirer about 50 years ago.
Yeah.
That's me in the upper corner there, holding a picture of a flying saucer of a type of Venusian scout craft, and then the bottom picture. My friend and I in high school, we were holding up copies of a flying saucer magazine that we published together called the Flying Saucer Report. Earl J. Neff of the Cleveland Ufology Project gave us $30 to start that. We had been on a camp out to the south of Cleveland, down by Walton Hills area, and there was used to be a big railroad trestle there, and a craft that we estimated to be about 50 foot in diameter flew over the railroad trestle, and we called the local paper, and they said, well, Earl J. Neff is the director of the Cleveland Ufology Project, and he investigates these kind of things. So we went to see him, and then started attending the meetings, and then he gave us some money to start this publication for young people, and then it got published in a Sunday school messenger that we did this, and then the National Enquirer. So Gray Barker of Saucerian Press, and Jean Duplantier up in Canada, a science fiction illustrator, and the editor of Saucer, Space, and Science, Gabriel Green of Amalgamated Flying Saucer Clubs of America out in California. They all started to trade information with us, and we went out to investigate reports and everything. And so I began to write articles in my local newspaper, the Bedford Times Register. And so I've been doing this for quite some time. And in the course of these events, I've met many individuals who claim to be from other planets. I met one of the first ones I met as a Venusian was Dolores Barrios. That's her and myself there on the cover. That's my third book, and she was said that she was born in 1585 in the Pyrenees Mountains of the border between France and Spain, and had encountered an angel from Venus who made her immortal.
Wow.
And so she's been coming back and forth to the earth and helping people, helping women and children along the way.
Now, does she claim to be in a different density? I mean, obviously, if we're talking about understanding our own evolution and dimensionality and being in a 3D vibrational state, I'm assuming she might have maybe shared with you what it meant to be made immortal. Is it a shift in density and dimensionality? Did she share a little bit more about what took place?
Yes, it's a process that some on Earth have called ascension, and others have called it translation. Another one that we met as an entire group, our OSIRIS, Outer Space International Research and Investigation Society. We had 14 chapters around the world, and I went up from California to our Salt Lake City chapter, where I met with Reverend Clayton Parker. He was a disciple of a woman named Annalise Guerin, and he said that we should get ready to meet some ascended masters. He was going to take us to Mount Shasta in California. So we started on this pilgrimage in 1987. That was also the year of the harmonic convergence.
Right.
And we got there. All the hullabaloo of the harmonic convergence had kind of died down by the time we got there. But he said that we got to the parking lot, and then he said we should just keep walking above the tree line, and he can't go with us. He was 87 years old at the time, but there were 8 of us, and we started walking up there, and then at a certain point there was a spring coming out of the rocks, and we decided to take a rest. We were above the tree line, and then this woman materialized, and she said that her name was Lady Ankara, and she was there to answer our questions about flying saucers, and she talked to us for about 3 hours and told us many wonderful things about life on Venus and the other planets. And she said that she was part of a team that was forming a colony in the Sirius star sector on a planet called Balaton, which is about 3 times the size of the Earth, and it's mostly mountainous terrain, very similar to that in Mount Shasta. And she said that she came to the Earth through a stargate that opened up over Mount Shasta, and that if we looked up the side of the hill, we would be able to see these mantises that were from 8 to 15 feet in length, and we did, because she said we were looking at it with our spiritual eyes versus our physical, and that these are the mantises that guard the stargates, that connect these portals throughout the universe. And she said that the women, the women colonists had more advanced telepathy, so they could communicate with the mantises by putting their left hand on the forehead of the mantises, and find out anything they needed to know about any place in the known universe.
Wow, this is fascinating. It's amazing, because there's a lot of correlation to the mantises with modern day cosmonauts, those that are doing a lot of meditation work, those that are experiencing ritual with indigenous people in plant medicine. You hear about these very intelligent mantis sentient life that guard these stargates. They're actually depicted in a lot of Egyptology and in some of the translated documents. I know that you have shared with me, and it's in your book as well, some of the hieroglyphs that show these mantis people that are holding down the stargates, and that is kind of like an eternal role that they have. Can you speak a little bit more about this, and also why Lady Ankara felt it was important to share that with you?
Oh yes, she said it was very important. that we understand that the humanoid species isn't the be and end all of life in the universe, that it takes on myriad forms. And just recently, I was I didn't know if I wanted to publish it or not, but I decided to do it. I have the original photographs by August C. Roberts, taken of Commander Valiant Thor and Vice Commander Don and his crew. And then with August C. Roberts' official seal on the back, and then his stamped comments, his typed comments about what was going on at that meeting at Howard Menger's Highbridge Farm for the Flying Saucer Club in 1958. But Commander Valiant Thor was speaking in a click language of the Koshan people of South Africa. And so that with his crew, with the 3 of his crew members there, and so that the others couldn't figure out what they were talking about. And then I was looking into the traditions and history of the Koshan peoples, and the mantis is considered a god, and the mantis and the bee had an intimate relationship in the mythology of the Koshan peoples, and were considered to be transmitters of celestial wisdom to the shamans.
Yes, I know that even the famous and now past Terence McKenna, who was one of the most probably the most celebrated and the most vocal of cosmonauts, would I believe he summated, and forgive me, this is not going to be a direct quote, but through the veils, within veils, there is a godlike mantis looking down at all of us and observing, our hairy-carry human and Earth 3D behavior, and that was the highest that he had gotten in terms of his ability to be able to see beyond what he considered to be the veils of third dimensionality. And others have talked about this, and those that study some of our ancient esoteric writings and some of the hieroglyphs. I lived in Jerusalem for 6 months, and I did go down to Egypt and did see some of the hieroglyphs that you mentioned that demonstrate the mantids holding these gates. We take so much for granted, Raymond. We assume that Hollywood and some of the greatest written works and the screenplays and the theatrics and poetry all come from the imagination of the individuals, and it doesn't occur to us that a lot of what they've come out with that we consider to be fiction is actually based on some of our greatest human history that is just being kind of reinvented upon itself. Wouldn't you agree, based on this, this amazing sharing that you're doing with us right now?
Oh yes, we tend to mythologize as we reimagine history and interpret it according to our own cultural context. But the tales of gods and goddesses and all these of the ancient days are beyond myth. Where there's smoke, there's fire, and these things are very real.
Well, it's only very recently. It was just, I believe, December 17th of last year. So really, really recent that we've had the kind of disclosure that many have known, since the beginning, that we are not alone, that our government has known that that is true, that a lot of that went on with Roswell and other visitations, and certainly a lot of well-documented unidentified aerial phenomenon that's been hushed and stamped out and shamed out of discussion, has been quite candidly validated by members of our former government agencies, the Pentagon, Department of Defense, etc. Our viewers have heard this before. It was like the most uneventful news that ever could have been expected to have come out when it hit mainstream. And I think that that was intentionally that way. But when we really take a look at the fact that this is now just a matter of fact, how much more do we not know that we really need to get caught up on to come out of this infancy that humanity has, going from thinking we were alone in the universe, which seems really ludicrous if you see it spatially, to, gosh, we've had neighbors this entire time, and according to our ancient texts, our history and our folklore, our mythology, they've been visiting us the whole time, and perhaps a lot of them are just, literally our neighbors. What do the Venusians want us to know, Raymond? I've got to stay a little bit, in the comedy of it, because it really does feel ridiculous when we consider the extremes of where we've gone just in my lifetime to where we are now, and the potential for how much more could be revealed. What do the Venusians want us to know about our role in, this area of the solar system, our role as we are maybe in a degree of sentient evolution with them? Where do we find ourselves at this point?
We're in a classroom, and we're in a learning phase right now, and preparatory to entrance into a greater galactic community when the time is right. In the beginning of the program, you mentioned various levels that civilizations rise and fall to. This was expressed by Dr. Kardashev in the former Soviet Union, and he said that there were 4 levels of civilization, and the first level to attain to is at the planetary level, where energy is shared and utilized on a planet-wide basis. So we're almost at that point now. And then moving ahead to the level of utilizing such information and energy at the level of a solar system, and then a galaxy, and then a universal energies, or interdimensional energies. So we're kind of dabbling even in these other areas. So it's very important right now that we make it into that first level, but that involves a wide degree of cooperation and peaceful coexistence with our neighbors, not only in space but also here on Earth.
Right.
And one of the things that's a clue in the sacred scriptures that we have of throughout the world is that we haven't been alone. That we've had these we call them angels or demigods or whatever among us all this time, and like Hebrews chapter 13 verse 2 in the New Testament. It says that we should always be kind to one another, because know ye not that ye entertain angels unawares.
Yes. Yes. And there's even a beautiful quote that, again, I would butcher, but C.S. Lewis made a comment, who was a great studier, a great theologian in his own right, in being able to extrapolate, his storytelling from his deep faith. And there was a comment that I thought was absolutely spectacular, and it is that there are no ordinary people, and that in a natural state of evolution, what you might have assumed was an ordinary person would be, in the right context, someone that you would fall down and worship if you were to see the truth of their potential and the truth of their evolution. And it really hit me that that was a powerful statement, that if we only see through these 3D eyes, if we only recognize the material world, then we are really missing the depth and the texture of our origins. And it sounds like your experience with the Venusians has been to wake us up to that. Obviously, coming into greater harnessing and utilization and even discipline of these higher faculties in the 6th sense, which is really many senses, isn't it, Raymond? We start to develop that spiritual muscle and be able to utilize it in our physical bodies. I actually teach energy and medical intuition, and it is very much from a place that this is inherent to everyone, that it is accessible for everyone. It isn't a gift. It's a skill set that needs to first be accepted and acknowledged before it can actually be harnessed and embraced and better utilized. Did you find that this was part of Lady Ankara's message or your experience with the Venusians so that we could move into this greater galactic federation, if it were?
Oh yes, Dr. Tatiana. In fact, when we when we uh, when we departed her presence, um, she gave all of us a hug, and Kay Studstrup we were meeting in her home, and one of the things that we did over there was we would practice psychometry, and Reverend Parker and others brought artifacts from Egypt, and we would see what we could read off of them and so forth. But she took the picture of us as a group surrounding Lady Ankara, and when we got back to Murray, Utah, we took it to a 1-hour photo booth, and she wasn't anywhere to be seen. And we were all huddled around, but there was nobody there. It's like the light went right through her. And then Reverend Parker said, "Well, that was Annalise Guerin."
Oh, really?
He said he wanted us to know that was Annalise Guerin, but she looked like a teenager. And Annalise Guerin, Annalise Guerin was born 1 year before Reverend Parker, in 1898, I think, on July 7th in American Falls, Idaho. But she also became a translated being, and she actually wrote 9 books about these very important subjects. The first one was Ye Are Gods, and then others were like Man Triumphant, and all these metaphysical books that teach you how to develop the kind of consciousness that can get you into heaven via the back door.
Yes, yes. Which actually is available to us. It is a break in the story and in actually the herd belief system that the only way off this planet is through the death of our vehicle. And I came across her work probably 20 years ago and read Ye Are Gods, and then came across Christine's Mercy's book, Sons of God. And Christine kind of followed after Annalise Scarin, in the understanding that it is the perfection of our behavior, of our character, coming from a place of deep, powerful gratitude, letting go of all resentment, being in total and complete forgiveness, humility, service to others, and also being in that space of gratitude where complaining cannot take roost, which is such an easy thing for we as human beings to experience, because the density of this planet can be felt so profoundly in our vehicles and in the emotional state that we're all able to harness. But it was really powerful to me, and I've known for years there's another way to do this. And now it's kind of the rage to look at the idea of ascension and human evolution. We've got this whole transhumanistic view that's going, but for those that are really holding on to the history as it's been laid out to us scripturally and in esoteric wisdom worldwide, there is this light body, ascension body, rainbow body, translated body. That's really what you're talking about, isn't it, Raymond?
Yes, exactly. And it's a great hope for humankind, because it's our potential, it's our destiny to live among the stars.
Well, I'm just wondering why you, in all your grace, are still here with us, Raymond, with all the keys to the kingdom. What is keeping you on this planet? Because I'm ready to sign up for this. How do we get to this next phase of evolution as Lady Ankara and others that you have interacted with have given you that wisdom?
Well, I've had the opportunity to study past lives, and I realize that this is my last incarnation here on the earth. But I had an operation at the Veterans VA Hospital in Pittsburgh, a couple of years ago. I didn't know whether I was going to make it or not. I had open heart surgery for a quadruple bypass, the same operation that President Clinton had. And while I was unconscious, I was taken aboard an etheric beam ship above the earth and met my higher self. And he offered me the opportunity to either go on to back to Venus, which is my home, or to complete my Venus books, to write them and leave them for humanity. And I came to realize I'm the only there's only three of us who've written these trilogies about Venus.
Mm-hmm.
George Adamski, one of the first contactees, wrote Flying Saucers Have Landed, and that was his first book, and then Flying Saucers from Outer Space and Flying Saucers Farewell. And then my sister Omnek Onek wrote a trilogy of books about Venus and life there. And then I wrote these three, Venus Rising, Rockets to Venus, and Cosmic Ray's Excellent Venus Adventure. This coming summer at Mount Shasta, Omnek Onek and myself will be doing a presentation for the From Venus with Love World Conference there on the slopes of Mount Shasta. And we hope that that if you have the opportunity to come out there, that you'll do so.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you did exactly what I was about to ask you to do. Please tell our viewers where they can find your books, what the title of those books happen to be, and some of the events you have coming up. I am very much in support of Rob Potter, who is with Promise Revealed and Prepare for Change, and the conference that he's doing. He's been a guest on the show, as has also Dr. Scott Werner and Shari Lynn. And we're thrilled to have you. It's kind of like getting a fuller, richer tapestry and picture of what's going to be offered there. There is so much wisdom and fascinating history to follow when it comes to this. And being one that studies ancient esoteric mystery schools, I can tell our viewers there are a lot of interesting pieces that are coming together in this grand mosaic. There's so much that can be studied and understood, and the body of knowledge that you have in having been a true and ardent historian is nothing short of deeply impressive, Raymond. Just getting through all of your footnotes is a dedication to detail, I assure you. So I am looking forward to joining all of you there. If you could leave us with a final note, because you are with us, you are here in the flesh, and we are grateful to have you as our guest tonight. What would you say is that final a bit of wisdom that we, our viewers, and the rest of humanity really need to walk away with to take the divine inheritance, the blueprint that is part of our growth and our evolution to the next level? What are we missing collectively?
What are we missing collectively? Okay. Well, one of the things that we can do is to just be it's just a simple message, and it's one that the Dalai Lama himself has said, is that one act of kindness is worth more than 1,000 prayers. And I remember back in Sunday school, there was a little poem. It said, "I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. I'd rather one would walk with me than merely point the way." And in our technological age, where we're so disconnected from people and from the human touch, I think we need to get back. We need to get back to that, and we need to walk with our friends, because we're not going to make it alone. We either cross the finish line together, or we don't make it at all.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. In all of the meditation work that I do, Raymond, because this is my story. This is the walk that I make, or I wouldn't be doing this show, and I wouldn't have fabulous guests like you on. The key message that I get again and again in those really pivotal veil riding moments where everything comes clear is my longing. There's not enough love in the world. And what I hear from that really eternal and celestial voice is make more, create more love in the world. That's what needs to happen. We need to be so much more in compassion for one another. And that's what I'm hearing in this message. And that's what I'm hearing will create the kind of cooperation that will grow us up spiritually, so that we can maintain what we've become technologically. So thank you so much for joining us. We could have talked for so much longer, and we're already past the hour. Raymond, we want to get people to promiserevealed.com. Take a look at the Mount Shasta conference coming up the last week of July, so you can hear Dr. Raymond Keller share more about his stories, take a look at his books. And I want to thank all of our audience for being here tonight. There is greater mysteries to be understood. We are excited to know more about them. Raymond, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Tatiana. A great privilege and cosmic blessings to you and to all of your audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Raymond. And on that note, I want to remind our guests, I want to remind our listeners, our viewers, thank you for your support of Solutionary TV. We are able to keep bringing this content to you because we believe you deserve a lot more pieces to the bigger story. And with the bigger story, we can make educated decisions that bring us together, because together we are the solution.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.